just after President Trump levied those 25% tariffs on foreign steel and aluminum, we're watching leaders of the European Union.
The decision by the European Union and Canada to impose a swift and forceful countermeasure against the new tariffs, announced by President Donald Trump, sent shockwaves throughout international trade and reverberated deeply within the intricate networks of the United States auto industry. The announcement by President Trump of tariffs on trade partners set in motion a chain reaction of retaliatory actions, with the EU and Canada seizing the opportunity to respond in kind. This strategic move, aimed directly at undermining the competitive edge of the U.S. auto sector, has not only highlighted the vulnerability of the industry to global trade disputes, but also underscored the complexity of interdependent economic relationships in the modern era. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. In a world where the auto industry stands as one of the most vital components of national economies, the imposition of tariffs carries profound implications for production lines, supply chain logistics, and the overall economic landscape. The countermeasures implemented by the EU and Canada were carefully calculated to target a critical pillar of U.S. economic strength. With the auto industry representing a substantial portion of the manufacturing sector, any disruption to its operational continuity can have significant ripple effects, affecting employment levels, consumer spending, and international trade balances. The timing of the tariffs and the subsequent retaliatory measures speak to an evolving trade dynamic where protectionist policies have become a tool for achieving strategic economic and political objectives. The actions taken by the EU and Canada can be understood as part of a broader strategy to recalibrate the balance of power in global trade. In recent decades, the automobile has not merely been a vehicle for personal transportation, but a symbol of industrial prowess and technological innovation. With production facilities spread across continents and supply chains that span the globe, the U.S. auto industry has enjoyed a status of economic invulnerability that is now being challenged. The response from these key trade partners reflects a recognition that the interconnected nature of modern commerce allows for the leverage of countervailing measures to effectively challenge tariff policies that are perceived as unilateral or unfair. Economic theories have long suggested that when one party in a trade relationship adopts protectionist measures, it can invite a tit-for-tat response from its partners. This is exactly what has unfolded with the EU and Canada. By imposing measures that specifically target U.S. auto imports and related components, these economies have effectively created a scenario in which American manufacturers face heightened costs and potential disruptions in accessing key markets. The decision to target the auto industry, which is deeply integrated into global supply chains, serves as a stark reminder that in today's trade environment, no sector operates in isolation. The ramifications of this move extend far beyond the immediate context of trade statistics, touching on issues of national sovereignty, international cooperation, and the very foundations of the free market. At the heart of the dispute lies the complex interplay between domestic policy priorities and international obligations. The United States, with its large-scale manufacturing and consumer base, has long leveraged its economic might to shape global trade policies. However, the imposition of tariffs, while often aimed at protecting domestic industries from perceived unfair competition, can simultaneously unsettle long-established trading relationships. The EU and Canada, understanding the potential for mutual harm in the event of unchecked tariffs, opted instead for a measured but resolute response that directly targets a key aspect of U.S. economic might. By focusing on the auto industry, these partners have chosen a sector where they hold significant expertise and competitive strength, thereby ensuring that their countermeasures would have a profound impact on American manufacturers. The implications of this strategic move extend to the broader fabric of international relations. The auto industry is not just an economic entity, it is a barometer of technological innovation, labor dynamics, and cross-border collaboration. Many of the leading U.S. automakers rely on parts and technologies sourced from European and Canadian firms, creating a tightly woven network of interdependence that complicates any attempt to isolate one economy from another. The retaliatory measures signal a clear message. Trade policies that disrupt this network will be met with a swift and coordinated response, reflecting a growing consensus among allies that unilateral protectionism is not an acceptable path forward. In this context, the events surrounding the imposition of tariffs and the ensuing counterstrike are emblematic of a larger global struggle for influence and stability. The counteroffensive strategy adopted by the EU and Canada can be seen as a form of economic signaling designed to recalibrate the rules of engagement in international trade. By targeting a high-stakes sector such as the auto industry, these nations have effectively raised the stakes of the dispute, compelling U.S. policymakers to confront the realities of a globalized economy where unilateral actions can have far-reaching consequences. The strategic calculus behind this move is multifaceted, combining elements of economic pressure, diplomatic negotiation, and long-term strategic planning. The objective is not merely to exact immediate economic damage, but to send a broader message about the importance of cooperative trade practices and mutual respect in the conduct of international business. One of the most striking features of this development is the way it highlights the asymmetries inherent in global supply chains. The U.S. auto industry, celebrated for its innovation and production capacity, is in fact deeply reliant on a web of suppliers from across the globe. European firms provide critical components, ranging from advanced electronics to precision-engineered parts, while Canadian manufacturers contribute to the seamless integration of supply chain logistics. This interdependence has allowed the U.S. auto sector to flourish for decades, but it also means that any disruption in trade flows can have a disproportionately negative impact on production efficiency and cost structures. The retaliatory measures imposed by the EU and Canada are designed to exploit these vulnerabilities, aiming to disrupt the delicate balance that underpins the industry's competitive advantage. The event in question also underscores the broader challenges faced by policymakers in an era of shifting geopolitical alliances. The United States, under the leadership of its newly elected president, has signaled a willingness to embrace a more aggressive posture in defending domestic industries. This approach, however, runs the risk of alienating long-standing allies and undermining the cooperative framework that has historically supported global trade. The swift reaction from the EU and Canada is a testament to the fact that economic power is no longer a zero-sum game, where one nation's gains are necessarily another's losses. Instead, the dynamics of modern trade demand a more nuanced approach, one that balances national interests with the imperatives of international collaboration. The broader implications of these developments extend into the realms of public policy and strategic planning. For U.S. automakers, the imposition of tariffs and the ensuing countermeasures represent a significant threat to operational stability and market access. Companies that have invested heavily in global production networks now find themselves grappling with the possibility of disrupted supply chains and increased production costs. The impact is likely to be felt across multiple dimensions, from the cost of raw materials to the final price of vehicles sold to consumers. As these firms navigate a rapidly changing trade landscape, they must contend with both short-term disruptions and the longer-term challenge of reconfiguring production strategies to mitigate the risks of future trade conflicts. From an economic perspective, the decision by the EU and Canada to target the U.S. auto industry also invites a broader discussion about the role of tariffs in shaping international competitiveness. Tariffs, while ostensibly designed to protect domestic industries, can sometimes have the unintended consequence of stifling innovation and reducing overall market efficiency. By erecting barriers to trade, policymakers risk disrupting the competitive pressures that drive companies to innovate and improve. In the case of the U.S. auto industry, which has long been a leader in technological advancements and manufacturing prowess, the imposition of retaliatory tariffs could hamper its ability to compete on the global stage. The move by the EU and Canada thus represents a strategic recalibration, one that seeks to restore a measure of balance to an industry that has been fundamentally altered by the imposition of trade barriers. The economic ramifications of this episode extend well beyond the immediate concerns of industry stakeholders. The auto sector is a critical component of national economies, not only in terms of direct production, but also in its role as a driver of ancillary industries such as logistics, finance, and technology. A disruption in auto manufacturing has the potential to create a domino effect, influencing sectors that are intricately linked through complex networks of trade and investment. The broader economic implications of this move have the potential to alter the trajectory of industrial development as companies reassess their strategies in light of a rapidly evolving trade environment. The strategic countermeasures enacted by the EU and Canada serve as a stark reminder of the fact that in today's global economy, the consequences of policy decisions are rarely confined to a single sector or geographical region. Political narratives have also become deeply intertwined with the economic dimensions of this event. The decision by President Trump to impose tariffs was rooted in a broader ideological framework that champions the protection of domestic industries and the pursuit of national sovereignty. However, the retaliatory actions by key trade partners have cast a long shadow over these ambitions, highlighting the risks associated with a unilateral approach to economic policy. The confrontation between the United States and its allies represents more than just a clash of economic interests. It is a reflection of deeper ideological divides about the future of globalization and the proper role of the state in regulating international trade. As nations navigate these turbulent waters, the balancing act between protecting national interests and fostering international cooperation becomes ever more complex and fraught with tension. Technological advancements and evolving consumer preferences further complicate the landscape. The U.S. auto industry, long renowned for its engineering excellence and manufacturing scale, now faces the dual challenges of adapting to a rapidly changing technological environment and contending with the geopolitical uncertainties introduced by trade conflicts. The countermeasures imposed by the EU and Canada have the potential to accelerate shifts in production strategies, prompting companies to explore alternative supply chains and innovate new models of production that are less vulnerable to external disruptions. In this context, the event serves as a catalyst for broader transformations within the industry, challenging firms to reimagine their competitive strategies in an era where political and economic boundaries are increasingly fluid. The strategic dynamics of this counterstrike are underpinned by a recognition that the global auto industry operates as a complex ecosystem. Every decision made by a policymaker or corporate executive reverberates throughout the network of suppliers, manufacturers, and consumers. The decision to target the U.S. auto industry is emblematic of an emerging paradigm in international trade, one in which strategic interdependencies are leveraged to achieve broader geopolitical objectives. The move by the EU and Canada is not an isolated incident, but rather part of a broader tapestry of economic maneuvers that reflect the shifting balance of power in the global marketplace. By focusing on a sector that is both emblematic of American industrial might and critically dependent on international collaboration, these nations have underscored the inherent risks of pursuing a unilateral trade policy without fully considering its broader implications. The intricate relationship between national economic policy and global market dynamics is brought into sharp focus by this sequence of events. The imposition of tariffs by the United States was intended to serve as a protective measure, safeguarding domestic industries from what were perceived as unfair trade practices. However, the subsequent countermeasures enacted by the EU and Canada reveal a different reality, one in which economic interdependence and shared interests compel nations to respond in kind when their own competitive interests are threatened. The decision to target the U.S. auto industry reflects a broader strategic calculus that weighs the costs of trade disruption against the potential gains of asserting economic sovereignty. In doing so, it challenges the notion that protectionism can serve as a panacea for domestic economic woes without incurring significant collateral damage on the international stage. The implications of this episode extend to the very nature of the competitive strategies employed by global corporations. Firms that once operated with a sense of security in the stability of established trade relationships now find themselves having to reassess their exposure to geopolitical risks. The countermeasures targeting the U.S. auto industry are a stark reminder that even the most formidable manufacturing giants are not immune to the vagaries of international politics. The event has sparked a broader dialogue within boardrooms and policy forums alike, prompting discussions on how best to insulate domestic industries from the turbulence of global trade disputes. As companies seek to chart a course through these uncertain waters, The challenge lies in balancing the imperatives of innovation and cost efficiency with the need to safeguard against the potential for abrupt policy shifts that can reshape entire industries overnight. Underlying the strategic dynamics of this confrontation is a recognition of the evolving nature of international economic power. The United States has long been a dominant force in global trade, its economic clout underwritten by a vast industrial base and a dynamic consumer market. Yet the actions of the EU and Canada reveal a growing willingness among key trade partners to assert their own interests in the face of unilateral policy decisions. This recalibration of power dynamics reflects a broader trend in which economic sovereignty is increasingly defined by the ability to leverage interdependencies for strategic gain. The targeting of the U.S. auto industry, a sector deeply emblematic of American industrial heritage, is a deliberate and calculated move designed to underscore the limits of unilateral economic action in an era where collaboration and mutual interdependence are paramount. The reverberations of this development are likely to be felt across multiple dimensions of both domestic and international policy. At the domestic level, the U.S. auto industry is forced to contend with a new reality in which the advantages of scale and technological leadership must be weighed against the vulnerabilities inherent in a globally interconnected supply chain. The counterstrike mounted by the EU and Canada represents a profound challenge to the prevailing assumptions about the invulnerability of American manufacturing prowess. It is a stark reminder that economic policies enacted at the highest levels of government can have far-reaching and sometimes unintended consequences that disrupt even the most well-entrenched industrial sectors. Economic models that once assumed a degree of insulation from geopolitical turbulence are now being called into question. The auto industry, a linchpin of the American economy, has long been celebrated for its ability to adapt to shifting market conditions and technological advancements. However, the current episode serves as a potent reminder that even industries with robust histories of innovation are not immune to the strategic pressures exerted by international countermeasures. The decision by the EU and Canada to focus their retaliatory efforts on this critical sector reveals a sophisticated understanding of how targeted economic policies can be used to reshape competitive dynamics and alter the balance of trade. In doing so, it challenges policymakers to rethink the assumptions that underpin traditional models of economic security and industrial strength. The interplay between economic strategy and political ideology is laid bare in the unfolding of these events. The aggressive tariff policies heralded by President Trump were rooted in a narrative of American exceptionalism and the pursuit of national self-reliance. Yet the swift countermeasures by the EU and Canada demonstrate that in the arena of global commerce, strength is measured not solely by unilateral assertiveness, but by the capacity to forge alliances and respond collectively to economic challenges. The decision to target the U.S. auto industry is emblematic of a broader strategic vision, one in which the preservation of a balanced and integrated global economy is seen as essential to maintaining long-term stability and prosperity. The episode has also prompted a re-examination of the intricate interdependencies that define modern supply chains. The U.S. auto industry, celebrated for its technological prowess and production capacity, is simultaneously reliant on a diverse array of suppliers and partners from around the world. This intricate web of relationships, which has long been a source of competitive advantage, is now being exploited by foreign counterparts as a means of exerting pressure on American manufacturers. The countermeasures implemented by the EU and Canada are a clear illustration of how strategic vulnerabilities can be transformed into potent economic leverage, forcing a reconfiguration of production networks and challenging long-held assumptions about the stability of global supply lines. Economic indicators, long used as proxies for assessing the health and competitiveness of industries, are now reflecting the heightened volatility introduced by this trade confrontation. Market analysts are scrutinizing shifts in production costs, changes in consumer demand, and adjustments in supply chain logistics as the impact of these countermeasures begins to manifest. The targeting of the U.S. auto industry represents not only a tactical maneuver in the realm of trade policy, but also a broader signal to the global business community that the era of unchallenged dominance is drawing to a close, In this context, the strategic decision by the EU and Canada is a powerful reminder that economic influence is best sustained through a combination of innovation, collaboration, and the prudent management of interdependencies. As nations navigate the turbulent waters of international trade, the events surrounding the imposition of tariffs and the subsequent counterstrike serve as a microcosm of the challenges inherent in balancing national interests with global economic realities. The move to target the U.S. auto industry is a calculated risk, one that encapsulates the complexities of modern geopolitics and the intricate interplay between policy decisions and market dynamics. The decision by the EU and Canada to respond decisively reflects a growing consensus that economic security in the 21st century is inextricably linked to the principles of mutual cooperation and strategic interdependence. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the EU and Canada's response to Trump's auto tariffs? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.